So what we are going to look into this session is we will be, I would say, investigating different functionalities of Python, and we'll check how Python actually works here. So I'll share my screen, and I hope my screen is visible to all of you.
Yeah.
Correct. You can mute yourself then again. Thank you. So by using the terminal, where those of you who are using actually Windows machine, you guys can use command prompt. And I've already told you that Python is basically the most popular programming language that is coming out. And as a programming language, what we look into, because there, it's not like Python is the first programming language that is out there. We have seen so many programming languages that are out there: C, C++, C Sharp, Java, .NET, and whatnot. Okay, and all of these programming languages have been there for quite a long time now. But the you only get comfortable by using a for using a programming language whenever you find its syntax is easier to be coded, right? Because it's all about coding, and it's all about writing piles of lines in your command, or piles of lines of command lines, which you can actually combine it together in order to create a program or create a workflow that you want your computer to do it on a repetitive basis.
If you enjoyed the content of the video, don't forget to like and share the video and subscribe to our channel.
Right? And this is like a machine to machine communication that can actually happen. So Python has efficient and high level data structures, and it's kind of simple yet very effective approach towards object oriented programming. And it is called as interpreted language, which means that it executes the instructions that are given directly without the need of compiling the program first. If you have been through C programming, you know that when you are done with the program, then your program will be first compiled, and then if there is any errors, that those errors will be checked, and then your program will be, I would say, executed. Otherwise, your program will not be executed. It's not a thing like that. In Python, we work with line by line execution. Okay, so you can use Python to write a back-end application as well, but you can also use it to create front-end application, web-enabled applications, and so many things. And it's worth noting that Cisco, since like several years, includes Python execution engine, which we are seeing over here, which we're going to see here, along with the Nexus switches as well. So Nexus switches are the switches in which there is by default a Python execution engine. Okay, for making Python scripts and like running those Python scripts directly on the box. We call it as on-box programmability. Some of you might be familiar that there is a feature called EEM, right? And by using EEM, you can actually create Java applets, which can like create an automated scenario in certain way. But you could, with Nexus switches, you could directly have a Python interpreter on the box itself. Okay, on and even on iOS XE boxes as well, where you can store the Python scripts into, like, you can upload it by using an FTP into the flash drive, and you can call those Python script there. Makes sense? But as I told you, there are two versions that we have. We have Python 2.x and we have Python 3.x. So 2.x is, uh, you can say, 2.x and 3.x version. However, they are there, but Python 2.x is currently supported on NXOS, iOS XE, and so. And this is by default installed into Linux and Mac machines. But Python community, however, doesn't like is not developing any newer version of Python 2, because 2.7.18 is the last one, and that's going to be outdated soon as well. But the syntax is much more easier than Python 3, and it has best library support yet. So that's why many of the developers are still using Python 2 in their production environment. And though people are trying to upgrade to Python 3 as well, but the applications are much stable on Python 2 than Python 3. And because many libraries also only exist for Python 2, it is still used there as well. So there are two ways you can say to execute the Python code. You can use it by, you can use something called Python dynamic interpreter, which we call it as Python shell, or you can write Python scripts, meaning like Here, can you see? I have one of the script on my desktop which says r1 underscore ssh.py. So you can create a new text file, or with any text editor, you can create that file and you can save it with the extension of .py, and then you can execute it separately by using Python engine. Otherwise, you can make a use of Python shell by default. And how do you execute the Python script? Now, first we're gonna see how you actually do Python operations in the shell. So what you can do, you can open up your command prompt, and after opening a command prompt, what you do is you click or you type Python here, and then press enter. And when you press enter, over here you can see that Python 2.7.18 is basically the engine that I have here, and that's the version of my Python that I'm using. And whenever you check that these three greater than sign, it indicates that you are currently into Python interpreter. So this interpreter, more commonly known as Python shell, it is used to write and test codes in real time without like having to write the full program or the script and then save it with .py and run it. There is no need like that. It will execute every line that you type here. Okay, and the Python shell is found natively on all Linux distributions, even like Cisco switch platforms as well. So in order to open or execute it, you just hit the Python, and then you will be inside of this Python execution engine. Make sense? And I hope everyone's command prompt is allowing you to use this Python interpreter, and nobody is facing any issue there. If you even face any issue while opening your Python interpreter, you can feel free to reach out to me. And it's basically, you can say, considered as dynamic language, and there is low entry barrier to this language, which means there is no requirement that you need to know about some other language, be it C++ or so. If you know it, it's much better, but if you don't know it, then there is no issue as well. So when I would say, like, Python is, as I said, Python is considered as dynamic language because you can see that Python doesn't require the variable, or doesn't require any of the code variable, or uh, like predefinitions of the variables that you will be using when creating a new variable. For example, let's say that we want to store some of the information, and the very whenever anyone starts with writing codes or so, the very first line that they write is hello world. So for example, let's say we say message is equal to, and then we say hello world, right? And then we hit enter here. So this is one of the way that how you can actually so this particular Python script has been executed. And what has been done there is, there is something which we call it as equal to sign, but in Python language we call it as assignment operator. Okay, we call a single equal to sign as assignment operator, because what does it do? It does attaches, or it does stores the value that you are specifying into a variable that you have here. So whenever you have an assignment variable on the left side, whatever you have on the left side is called as a variable. And whatever you have on the right side, you call it as a value of that variable, or you can say data. Make sense? Now, in other sorry, in other programming languages, a variable can be created by assigning it to certain data type. Now, when I talk about data type, let me create a text editor. Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm saying over here is equal to sign is called as assignment operator. And then on left side of equal to, we call it as variable. And on right side of equal to, we call it as data, or we can call it as value that is actually being stored. So this data over here, or this value over here, is being stored somewhere. You can say hello world is being stored into a variable called message there. Make sense? So see, When we talk about it, that there is something called assignment operator, and whatever is there on the left side of the assignment operator, we call it as variable, and whatever you have on the right side, you call it as value or data. So by using this assignment operator, which is an equal to sign, you assign a data or you assign a value to your variables. But there are different type of data that actually exist. Correct. If I specify that your data can actually be a string, your data can actually be an integer, your data can be a list, a dictionary, and every other thing that is available into Python that can be used as data type. And we are about to explore each and every type of data type that we have in Python so far, like we are concerned with. But yeah, when you assign a specific thing to I would say a variable, you can call that variable directly message, and there you go. When I called variable message, it printed out hello world. You get that? So it means that this shell is executing our each and every operation one by one, each and every operation line by line. After you hit enter, it executes the operations of whatever you have stored on that line. And when you have it there, you can create whatever type of variable you want. It's just that your variable cannot start with an underscore, and your variable cannot start with numbers. Your variable must start with an alphabet. But you can have numbers and you can have underscores inside your variable after you start it with message or with like alphabetical order. So you can say that message or message 123 is equal to, and then you can say hey there and store it, and then call message 123, and it will be printed out. You get that? Now here's the thing. When I say that Python is much better with when it comes to working with variables, because if you consider some of the, I would say, values, or if you consider some of the other languages, then in those languages you need to define what type of data needs to be stored in that variable. You understand that? So when you look at that, as I was saying, that there can be multiple types of data that you can be storing inside different variables that you have. And when we talk about that, if I show you some of the example, let's say, for example, C program creating variable. So when you look at some of the C programs that can be there, there you go. You have this. Can you see this? So over here in C programming, you are creating a variable which is called as age. And then after that, you need to define that what is the value that you are going to store in a variable called age. So you specify first that integer age, and by knowing this, the program gets to know that okay, I want to create a variable called age, and in that the only value that I'm going to allow to be stored is going to be integer. So I cannot store like hello world inside a variable age now, because that variable age only accepts integers. And then once you are done, you also need to use semicolon in order to specify that you are done with that particular line. Just like that, there can be other programming languages as well, which needs to be specified with the type of the variable that you're gonna, the type of the variable that you're gonna expect the data of. Do
Excuse
you
me,
understand
Abhijit.
what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, we understood, but I have a question.
Uh-huh.
It is very fine that in the Python we don't specify whether it is a float or integer or it is a string or whatever. But when
Uh-huh.
we give it to the C, for example, it takes the memory accordingly. For example, 2 bytes, 4 bytes. So it use the memory in a
Uh-huh.
better way, or is it not the case?
No,
Or
no,
we
this is
can
the
say
same
that
case
this.
over here as well. It's the same case over here as well. It
Okay.
will assign temporary memory to that variable.
Looking at the
Okay.
type of the, it will automatically see the type, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So it depends. Like, so there is no empty variable creation that you can create it. Whenever you're creating a variable, you are assigning some data within that particular variable, right? And that data can be of different size. Make sense, Isan?
Yes, very right. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. So depending on the size of the data that you're storing, like the size of this string is different than the size of, like if I say something, hey there, meet me at Central Park at 5 o'clock. So this is a bigger string. The size of that particular string might be different over there. Okay, and that depends. So the temporary memory will be allocated for that variable as well. The only thing that benefits us for over here is we don't need to be worried about what type of data can be specified in that variable. It is pretty dynamic. For one instance, you can store a variable, you can store the type, one type of data in that variable, and you can replace the data on the next instance, and the variable will adjust accordingly. For example, there is one way that you can check that what is the type of data that you have inside a string or inside a variable, sorry. So you can use it something like a type function. So I can say type, and in bracket, I can open up a bracket, and I can call that a variable I want to check the data type of. So I can say type of message, and then as I hit enter, it says the type of
Okay.
that is string. Yeah.
That variable name can be anything name, right? That is not any standard names, right?
No, no, you can define anything that you want. It just there is just a condition that the variable cannot start with a numerical value, and it cannot be starting with an
That
underscore.
understood. That understood. That
Yeah,
understood.
yeah,
Just name is anything like that. That variable name.
yeah. It can be anything.
Abhijit, I have two questions.
Thank you.
Uh huh.
So, whenever defining the data, you're putting in double inverted comma. So, is it mandatory? And
No, this actually refers to a string. Whenever you use string, you need to specify it in double quotes. We're gonna talk about that when we talk about specific data types.
another doubt is like when you're taking the output, it is coming with a single inverted comma.
Because we are not using print function as of now. That's again coming up.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. These things are coming up into the section today itself. All right. So you can see that by using this type thing, in that functions, you can pass a parameter or you can pass an argument that says message. So what I'm doing by using this, I want to check the type of data that is stored inside this variable message. And it says str, which means it's a string that is available inside a variable called message. Now, if I again go and specify something like message is equal to 12345 and hit enter, and then I say again use the same thing, type of message. You see the type changed to integer. So variable adjust the data type that you have stored inside it accordingly. Make
Hi
sense to you
everyone.
all?
Sure.
Yeah, perfect. So
No, yeah,
yeah, who's there?
Mike. Sorry, I just finished one meeting. Hello,
Yeah, who's there?
is it Romaric?
Yeah, hi Romaric, how can I help you?
Nope, I just joined.
Okay, no issues. We're just discussing about Python. Okay, what have been missed by you, you can look into recording, because I cannot actually like repeat everything again. Good, because so you can catch up with the recording, but we are just at the beginning of understanding of Python, how we can actually use Python. So when you open up the interpreter, you can just go into the command prompt, and you can hit Python, and you will be inside the interpreter here. And then we are actually investigating how data types and how Python is actually used in order to do different things. Make sense? So
Yeah.
after going into the command prompt, you can hit Python, and you will be inside this interpreter, and you can do operations then. So as we saw that how this assignment operator and how variable and how data or value can be stored in a variable. You see, whenever I kind of stored something and then I just called the name of that particular variable, it printed out the data that is inside of this. So it is the way that how it actually gives you the value back. This is how Python actually works. But in order to print it naturally without doing or without printing any extra stuff that is in there, because when I say if I print message now, then it gets printed without any quotes. But when I print some string, then it gets printed with single quotes there. Correct? because we are not using any specific, I would say, instruction for that particular string to print certain things. Make sense? Now, let's say that I create a variable inside which I'm actually specifying something, read like this. So I have two things: interface, uh, or let's say config is equal to, I'm creating a variable called config, and then I'm saying interface fa0 slash 0, and then I want to say slash n, or let's say no shutdown, and then IP address uh, DHCP, let's say. Okay. These are, how many commands are these? Can I say these are three different commands that we use in our CLI? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
perfect.
Yep.
So if I say config, now I'm trying to print all these things, okay? And it's printing out in single line. But I want each of this particular command to be printed out in a new line, right? Considering three different commands over here. So we use something called escape character, or escape character in Python. And this escape character is nothing but slash n, okay, which actually creates new line. Which actually creates new line kind of thing. And what does it mean? It actually means something you can say. Now, when I redefine, config is equal to interface gigabit ethernet 0 slash 0, or sorry, fa0 slash 0, and then I say slash n, and then I say no shutdown, and then I say slash n, and then say IP address DHCP, and then, oh sorry, and then I complete the double tag or double quote and then store it. Now, if I say config now, then even it's the same thing, right? But if I say now print config, then you see these command printed out
Mm.
on three different lines. So if you by default call the variable with its name, it will not detect the, I would say, special characters or escape characters or any other things that it can be printed out, other than the way that you actually use a function called print or a method called print. So what you do in order to print out anything in Python that you have stored, you use a print function. Make sense? So by using this print function, you are actually printing out on your display whatever thing or whatever operation is being carried out by that Python script. So I can say router one is equal to,
Habit. AB.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
After the IP address DHCP, why didn't you put that slash in there?
Because I don't want another new line there.
Okay.
You get that? If I just go ahead and again store it like this slash n. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
When I now print it, you see, there's an
Okay.
empty line that has been inserted.
Okay. No problem. No problem.
Yeah. So in order to perform all these operations or in order to print anything, we actually use something called print. And when we use print, it can actually be printed out like that. Now here's the thing. The first type of data that we are actually looking into is called as strings. So I can say
Excuse
the
me,
first
Abhijit,
type
you
of
use the
data.
word for print. Excuse me. You use the
Uh-huh.
word for print function as well as method. So both are the same, or there is some difference between the
No,
two?
there are some differences. We'll be talking about that as well. Okay, as we
Okay.
have not been like into that deeper manner, that's why I'm referring it dynamically. But you'll understand what each and everything means over there.
Fine. Thank you.
Yep. So the first data type that we are looking at is string here. And how does strings actually work? So you can call strings are simply a sequence of characters that are surrounded by either double quotes, or they can be surrounded by single quotes as well. You need to keep in mind that as many like people just like starting out often forget the quotes over there. But without quotes, you are actually referencing an a variable there, or you are referencing an object there. But with quotes, it's a string there. You see, because whenever we specify variable and whenever we specify in a string, the data inside of that quotes looks similar to the variable, like hello world and message. But until unless this hello world is surrounded by quotes, it will not be considered as string. You get that? So if I say that host
I didn't
name,
get that. I didn't get that. Please come
I
again.
didn't get
I'm
you over
saying,
here.
yeah, I'm saying that whenever you are actually creating a string which is kind of nothing but sequence of character, and it can contain numbers as well, it can contain alphabets as well, it can contain underscores or any special character as well, it will only be assumed as a string by the Python script if and only if it is surrounded by either double quotes or single quotes. You get that? Meaning, if I say that host name is equal to router 1. Now, is it correct way of specifying a string or storing a string into a variable?
No, that's not a string.
That's not a correct way of storing a string
We need
into
to
a
give it
variable,
a
right?
single quote or double quote.
If I do this, what do you think will
You're
happen over
saying
here?
host name is router one. You're saying host name is the same as router.
Yeah. So it's gonna say now what I'm doing over here. When I say enter, it says router 1 is not defined over here. Makes sense? Which means
Mm-hmm.
that by doing this operation, I am actually trying to store the data of my router 1 variable into a new variable that is hostname. But my script identifies that there is no router 1 variable that has been defined earlier. But according to me, this router 1 is not a variable. It's a string that I want to store into, like, I want to store as it is into hostname. So for storing a string into a variable, what I say, hostname is equal to router 1. You get that? And this is how you store a string inside a variable. Makes sense to you?
Yes.
And you can do the same thing. Now I can say print hostname. And when I say print hostname, it will be printed out without any quotes there. Because it will actually print out the actual data that is in there inside the variable. You get that? And you can do the same thing by using single quotes as well.
AB,
Mm-hmm.
I was logged out. I don't know if it was from your side. So probably I missed something you said.
That's not possible from my side, I would say, Lego. There no one is logging you out. We are discussing about a variable called we are discussing about a data type called string, which
Mhm.
can be a sequence of characters. It can include any numbers, any sequence of characters, or alphabets or special characters or so. So just like we use assignment operator in order to store a string inside a variable that you are creating. So on the,
In
whatever
this
you have on,
in the string, you can also make use of numeric numbers. Have been numbers too.
yeah, you can store numeric numbers as well, but they will be treated as uh, that will be treated as integer, sorry, string as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So over here, when you say that router one actually is is a string that is being stored into a variable called host name, but you can do the same thing by using a string and surrounding it with single quote as well. And I can do that by saying, let's say, vendor, for example, and I can say vendor is Cisco. You see, this time I didn't use double quote in order to surround the string. I just use single quote. And then I can say print vendor, and the same thing can be printed out like this as well.
Why are you using single quotes?
These are two options that we have available in order to store a string. You can use either single quote, you can use a double quote. There is no difference in the working model, but these are just options that are available. Now,
Okay.
why are these both the options that are available? Let's say you have a string which says, for example, message is equal to, and I want to print out something like, hello there, meet me at Central Park, okay, at 5 p.m. or 5 p.m. You get that?
Oh,
Now, inside my string, this is my entire string over here. Now, I have surrounded my entire string with double quotes so that the Python script can understand it. But I also want that whenever this message gets printed out, I want central part to be printed out with double quotes because I want to highlight it. That's part of my string. So how will Python identify that there is something that needs to be printed as well, and there is something that needs to be used for identifying string as well? Do you understand my question, guys?
yeah.
So for such cases, because when I say enter here, then it will give me an error. It says invalid syntax because according to Python, it's pointing out towards central part. So what's happening over here is whenever the Python is taking the consideration for storing that string into the message variable, the string actually starts over here and the string ends up over here because that's where the double quote is closing according to Python. And then there is something called central part, which is not the part of the string anymore. And then there is another string that starts up there and which contains at 5 p.m. and some periods and some exclamatory mark, and then closes down the string. So that's kind of a syntax error that's there. So for certain scenarios, what do you do now in such cases? You basically make use of both the type of quotes that are available. So what you can do, you can decide that which quote fashion do you want to use in order to be printed out as part of your string. Do you want the central part to be surrounded by single quotes, or do you want it to be surrounded by double quotes? So if in case you want it to be surrounded by single quotes, then use double quotes outside of the string and use single quotes inside. Otherwise, you do the vice versa. You can use single quotes outside there and double quotes inside. So I can go and specify my message like this. Message is equal to, and use single quotes here and say, hello there, meet me at Central Park at 5 p.m. And then I close my single quote there. And now if I say hit enter, and if I say print message, then you can see that this is my string, and now single Central Park has been printed out with the quotes itself. Do you understand this?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Others? Isan, Cletus, Biswajit, Surojit, are you guys good with it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
good.
it's good.
Very nice.
Perfect. Perfect. So this is how you actually use quotes over here. And that's, I would say, one of the data that we have. Now, usually when we work with numbers or so, these numbers can also be, because in our cases we'll be working a lot with IP addresses, we'll be working a lot with subnet masks and loopback IDs and so and so and so. So all these can actually be a strings as well. So I can say IP is equal to 10.1.1.1, right? And then I can say mask is equal to two five
Two
five two
five
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 two
two five
five.
five zero. Let's say, right? I can go up like that as well. But when I specify that over here, I want to print IP. IP can be printed out. I want to print mask. Mask can also be printed out over here. But if I want to replace something, then I cannot replace any element of that particular, I would say, string. For example, I just want to change, like I entered the number or the IP address wrong over here, and I wanted to enter something like 10.1.1.5. That's the correct IP address that I wanted to enter. So there is no way that you can change just the missing part or the wrong part of that string. What you need to do, you need to redefine that particular string there. Because as I have printed IP, it's 10111. And if I say print, or I would say now I say IP is equal to 10115. And then if I say print IP, now the IP is redefined to something called 10115.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense? So there is no way in the data type, because data types are of two types. You can say the data type can be mutable and the data type can be immutable as well. What is this mutable and immutable? The
Can be changed
mutable
and
type,
cannot be changed.
yeah, can be changed and cannot be changed, which means the individual characters can actually be changed, or you need to directly replace everything there. So string is called as immutable, which means individual character cannot be natively modified from the string. You need to change the entire script. You need to change the entire string directly. Make sense to
So
you?
so we'll call this one mutable.
Immutable, yeah. We call
Immutable.
we call string as an immutable object.
But wait, I want to ask one question.
Hmm.
The that IP equals to the first one you did 10.1.
Hmm.
We still you wrote another script for it, like another code for it eventually. But I thought that you're going to put maybe variable IP, then just insert what you want to change and it will change.
No, I missed that. Can you repeat that again, please?
You said that if you imagine that you made a mistake, that last dot one, you wanted to change it to dot
Yeah,
five.
yeah,
So
yeah.
me, I was thinking that you were not going to rewrite the IP equals to 10.1 point. I thought you were just going to write probably a a probably maybe a
Maybe.
syntax that will just change it instead of you writing the whole IP is equals to
No,
10.
that's why we call it immutable. You cannot change the individual, I would say, characters of that particular string. That's why it is part of immutable objects.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.